It is overtime again here at Old Favorite Friday, and we are continuing to discuss Sam Smith's Nut Brown Ale. Joel, you are the brown ale aficionado. You are you love this style. You talk about brown ales very often. I'm right there with you. I love a good brown ale. This is one that we just discussed. You haven't had this in a while, but you have a good opinion of it. In the past at least you have. Now you're trying it again for the first time in a while. What is your opinion here?
It is, as the show says, an old favorite. It's really refreshing to revisit this thing after so long. God, there's so many notes just popping up in my mind as I revisit this one. You know, a lot of people, they look at things that are just brown ale in general sounds intimidating. It sounds like it's heavy. It sounds like it's too much for me. It's probably higher in alcohol, just like all those stout myths. And it's not true. I mean, this thing is very approachable. It's rather thin. I would venture to say that this is a lot thinner than you would find in an American interpretation of a brown ale. Certainly a lot thinner than the ones I've made in the past. But it still has all this great toasty, toffee, caramel flavor going on, that bready malt, and remarkably a dry finish. It's crisp. It's so easy drinking, but there's so much to it. It feels like a meal in a glass almost.
But it's also refreshing. I mean, that's the interesting part about it. It's funny that you said thin, because I always, especially with the beer that I really enjoy, and sometimes we get recommendations for these, and I have to try them maybe sometimes for the first time and go, oh yeah, this would be a great beer for this. I've had this beer many, many times in the past. So I looked it up on Untappd and saw a 3.5 or a 3.6 rating, which is just criminal for a beer this good. And I saw one of the first reviews said it was thin, and gave it like a 1 star or whatever it was. And I was going to ask you, in the brown ale style, is there a room for variance? Can you have a thinner brown ale and a richer, thicker brown ale and still be a brown ale?
Absolutely. I think it runs the gamut like so many other styles. I mean, there are certainly much thinner IPAs and thicker IPAs, some very bitter IPAs and ones that have 0 IBUs and all the fruit and juice. So with this one, I just think it fits right in that approachable gateway beer kind of mode. And then, you know, the kind of brown ale I like to make is not necessarily this kind, but I like to drink them all. So I'm glad that there's a spectrum for these and that there are different variations on them. And I wish more breweries would make them. I feel like it's one of those things that they're afraid to kind of dip into because they don't sell very well. I mean, they're not, you know, aside from Maduro from Cigar City, they're really not that popular in Florida because it's so hot and dark beer generally is not your everyday sipper. So this could be, and I think it should be.
It's a shame. I was just doing a event for Yelp and doing a little beer tasting, and we had our red ale there, right? I think browns and reds are in a very similar, they hold a similar place in my heart at least, whereas they're darker in color and they're traditionally pretty approachable beers, but they're, as you've mentioned before, intimidating. And all these people were out of hand saying they're not going to drink this red ale, they're not going to like it, and then they drank it and said, oh wow, this is really good and it's really refreshing. And the perception that people have on a beer like this is so often so wrong. And it really is the craft beer people that are already into craft beer that drink these. But those people tend to go for the more over-the-top flavors of an imperial stout, or go for the over-the-top flavors of an IPA, or they want to put, you know, bubblegum and strawberry shortcake in the beer. They go towards the extremes, whereas this is meant for, in a lot of ways, for approachable novices to get into it, or just, you know, this is an everyday drinker for me. I mean, if you have this in your fridge on a Friday, I don't care if it's Florida and it's hot, I will drink this, be refreshed, and have deliciousness at the same time. Yeah. And I think that's one of the reasons why this style of beer is kind of, it's fallen out of favor. It's why brewers like you are not able to make this beer that you love and get it out in the market, because, you know, the market is kind of dried up for it, and it's really sad.
It is. And the other thing is it pairs so well with food. I mean, the first time I went to North Carolina to get barbecue, I was thrilled to see a brown ale on the menu, and I immediately made that my first pairing. And it works so well together. This is actually a style that I opened up with at one of our throwdowns when I was competing against you guys. Mm-hmm. And everyone was like, what, brown ale first course? Are you kidding me? And it kicked ass. So I was thrilled to, you know, see that happen. And there's really nothing to be intimidated by. And it's funny because if you do load it with adjuncts, which should be even more intimidating, it feels like they would kind of leapfrog this and go right for that. And those can be done very well too. I mean, I've made them with coconut and actual nuts and other things like that, and they've all been really nice. But you know, someone once said, the more you add, the more you take away. And I feel like that definitely applies in this type of beer.
The simplicity of this beer, it is nutty, it has toffee, it has caramel, it's layered, it's fruit forward, it's got some really nice fruity notes to go along with, probably from the yeast, but from the malt characteristic as well. I would love this with like gamey meats, right? Like duck, roasted duck would be just perfect with this. You mentioned things like barbecue, I believe, in the past when it comes to brown ales and red ales. There's so much going on in this glass and so much to go on in pairings and places you can drink it where it's approachable and appropriate, that I really hope that you go out and pick up some Sam Smith not brown ale, but brown ales in general. When you see them out there as a craft beer aficionado, if you haven't picked them up in a while, remember how great they are. And when you go to a brew pub, if you're lucky enough to see someone breaking a brown ale, that's always my first go-to, right? Because it's malty, it's rich, it's going to be flavorful. And if it's well balanced, I know they're doing something right in the back of the house, and I'm probably going to enjoy everything from them. So highly recommend picking this up. Thank you for joining us again for Old Favorite Friday. Please poke around and look at some other videos where we're discussing other classic beers. Leave comments. Let us know what beers we should be drinking in the future. That would be wonderful. And then always like and subscribe and share this. If you are preaching the gospel of great beers and brown ales and such and so forth, let other people know so by sharing it with them. And we'll see you next time. Cheers.
Cheers.